Legends sucks sometimes, so we're going to talk about how we can make it suck a little bit less. So here are 12 changes that we need in League of Legends. Number 1, more bans. First things first, League of Legends is in desperate need of having more bans added into the game. The last time League added in bans was in patch 7.11 all the way back in 2017, and back then there were only 136 champions. Now there's 158 champions in the game, with even more on the way. Now the real question is, how many bans should there be and how should it be added? I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that want 2 bans per person, and this would also be pretty simple to add into the game. But to be completely honest, personally, I think it's actually too many. Banning potentially 20 champions per game is a little bit excessive. There will probably be a time where that's necessary, but we haven't reached that time quite yet. Instead, my proposal will be adding in 1 extra ban per side. Nothing too crazy, but just enough to prevent 1 or 2 more busted champions from entering your game. Each team will ban 6 champions total for a potential of 12 being banned per game. I said potentially because a lot of the time each team bans the same champion. The real question would be, how is that 6th ban on each team determined? Well, I propose that everyone gets their original 1 ban each, and then at the end you would also get 1 more as a team. Everyone on your team will put in a vote for who else they wanted banned, and the champion with the majority of the vote would get banned. If it was a tie, it would be randomly decided by the client. This would essentially look exactly like the pick sequence from One For All, but instead of picking, you're just banning. And it also gives you the opportunity to work together with your team, or not. Moving on. Number 2, a better honor system. The overall goal of a good honor system is to encourage players to be less toxic and more honorable. But let's be honest, League's current system does none of that. Let's start off with the first issue, which is there is no incentive to be honorable. I mean, look at the highest possible reward for getting level 5 honors in the game. All you get is a pick out of some really outdated Warwick and Twitch chromas, or a pick of an insanely old Warwick or Twitch skin. And not only are they old, they are arguably some of the worst skins in the game, and that is not an exaggeration. These rewards just straight up suck. And what's dumber is you can get these skins from chests. I got this medieval Twitch skin like a year ago. So even if my goal was getting this Twitch skin, which I doubt was anyone, then it doesn't even matter anymore. What's really crazy to me is how simple one of these solutions is, and that's just to add in better honor rewards. Instead of these crappy skins that literally no one cares about, what if there was an exclusive one that you got at the end of the season for hitting honor level 5, just like there is for hitting gold in rank? And just like the Victorious skins, they would be ones that you can't receive from chests. Anyways, all of that aside, one other thing that we need to do is bring back the ability to honor your opponents. I believe the reason that this was taken away, and I could be wrong, was because people on the Korean server were abusing it. You see, back then, if you got enough honors from your last game, you would get little badges on your loading screen border. So what happened was people in Korea started abusing this and started honoring the person inting or griefing so that the players in the next game knew who to kill. Again, I don't know if that's entirely true, but nevertheless, they don't have those in the game anymore, so it wouldn't be an issue anyways. Nevertheless, we should have the opportunity to promote positivity, not just report the negativity. Number 3, the client. There's not much to say about this other than it just needs to get fixed. I'm not gonna lie, I like the updated feel of the new client, but it shouldn't come at the cost of actually working properly. I feel like we've been struggling with this for way too long, and I have lost count of the amount of times that I've had to restart my client just to play the game. And I'm sure you have too. Yo, if you're enjoying, please consider poking that sub button. It would seriously mean so much to me. Thank you. Number 4, champions. The prices of some champions are insanely overpriced when you think about it. You may be thinking, well, at a certain point, once they've been out long enough, their price will finally drop. Well, I thought that too once, but that couldn't be further from the truth. There are some champions that were released at the beginning of the game that still cost 4,800 blue essence or more. Take Kennen, for example. He was released in April 2010 and still costs the same as a champion like Echo, who was released 5 years later. Or Lowy, who has been out since 2015 and still costs 6,300 blue essence. I understand they're a company and that they're trying to make money, but it shouldn't take 5 years to get all the champions. At least bring back the ability to re-roll champion charts. Number 5, Clash. Guys, I'm gonna be honest, I love Clash. I love the ability to queue up and play League as a team instead as an individual. It feels like you're playing a completely different game, and it's objectively the way League was supposed to be played. However, there's a few things that I do hate about it. To start, it just doesn't happen often enough. Once a month is way too spread out. I don't see a reason that they couldn't place it at least every week. That way, if you have something going on the weekend of Clash, then you don't have to wait another month for it to come back. Second, the reward system kind of sucks, which is a reoccurring pattern that I'm detecting for League in general. One of the biggest problems Clash has is that if you lose your first game, a lot of people lose incentive to continue on in the tournament, and for good reason. Only first and second place really receive decent rewards, and by decent I mean a skin shard. Third place and below, the best you can really get is a ward skin, which is not very hype. And since if losing your first game means you have no shot at first or second place, it's understandable why a lot of people just end up forfeiting after losing round 1. Now the solution here again is pretty simple. Just create more rewards. What if suddenly the consolation bracket winner received a skin shard too, not just a logo and a ward skin? I guarantee you from that change alone, more people would stick around. The other thought would be to make it a double elimination tournament, which is a cool idea, but that would also create a huge bracket. However, it could be cool to do a double elimination tournament once a month. Also, Smurfs suck in Clash, but to be honest, I have no idea how you solve that. Number 6, the tutorial. I've mentioned this before in some of my other videos, but the tutorial needs to be completely redone. To sum up what I said before, I think right now, honestly, it does more harm than good. It keeps you on lock screen, it forces you to run it down mid, and it really doesn't teach you anything helpful, which is kind of the point of a tutorial. Now here are a few suggestions that I have. First, add in a very basic tutorial. One kind of like they have now, but actually helpful and better. All it has to do is teach you the very basics, like moving, how to move your camera around the map, what abilities are, and the goal of the game. League is a complicated game, so I'm not expecting them to be able to teach everything in one run through. However, what they should do is add in a bunch of additional scenarios you can go through that teaches you small bits and parts of League. Imagine if there was a scenario that taught you the basics of how to manage a wave and what a slow push is, what a freeze is, etc. Some could even be as simple as a scenario where they had a Fed Ahri on the other team and they asked you what item do you buy to itemize against her if you're playing a tank. Spirit Visage or a Thornmail. These are the kind of things that I believe would actually be helpful to people learning and understanding the game. They don't necessarily have to force players to play through these scenarios, but it would have been extremely nice to have these resources available when I was starting out. Otherwise, players will have to rely on the shop for advice, which as we all know isn't the most reliable sometimes.
You guys ever want to know why I don't use this shit at all? Well, there you go. Buy Thornmail against Evelynn.
Piggybacking on all of this, we can also make new players' lives easier by maybe not handicapping them right off the bat. Why limit brand new players to ghost and heal when instead we could be teaching them the right way from the beginning? Number 7, the practice tool. Going off the whole learning how to play League thing, one of the things Riot could easily do, which would benefit everyone, is unlock all the champions for the practice tool. It would be a great place for people to try out champions for the first time and get a feel if they even wanted to buy it in the first place. I mean, let's be honest, how many people actually use this rent a champion option from champion charts? That would be no one because it's stupid. It's already hard enough to get blue essence as it is. On top of that, Riot needs to add in the ability to switch champions while we're in practice mode. That way, if we're trying out a bunch of different things or recording videos, we don't have to constantly reload a new game. What's the most frustrating thing about all of this is that all of those things are already implemented into Wild Rift. Seriously. In Wild Rift, you can try any champion you want in Practice Tool, and you can switch champions in the Practice Tool itself. In other words, Riot has proven that they're not only capable of thinking about these ideas, but also capable of doing them, but they just haven't brought it to League yet. So please, Riot, just add these features into League, please. Number 8, the ranking system. The League of Legends ranking system has always had a lot of issues, and it seems very outdated in a way. Now, obviously, I'm not an expert when it comes to ranking systems in games, but I truly believe that some of these ideas could help improve things. The first is an option at the end of the season to do an MMR reset. Now, I say option mainly because if it was mandatory for everyone, we would have challenger players playing against iron players at the start of next season, which probably wouldn't be the best. And if you ended in high elo, you're most likely not going to want to reset your MMR since it would start you way lower anyways. However, if you ended in bronze, this is a good opportunity to try and see if you really do deserve to be gold. One of the main problems I see is that at a certain point after people have played enough, their MMR just gets stuck. And even if you did improve during that time, it's still incredibly hard to climb because of how sucky your MMR is. I know people that definitely should be silver but are stuck in bronze just because of how bad their MMR is. They can lose one game and win 2 games and still be down LP. Now, some may argue that if you truly deserve to be in silver, you'll get there eventually because you deserve to be there, which is true and a fair point. But the main problem here is that someone could either grind out 50 games, getting 13 LP a game, taking forever to climb out of bronze, or they could just make a new account, have fresh MMR, and get into silver in about 10 games. It really just all comes down to time. I mean, I'm sure a ton of you watching out there right now have had this exact same problem. And a lot of you have probably even made new accounts to rank on for that exact reason. Well, this is where having that opportunity to refresh your MMR at the end of the season comes in really handy. Not only does it help save people time, but it also helps reduce the amount of Smurfs added into the game. Suddenly, thousands of players don't have a reason to start a new account anymore, which also means they don't have to crush some poor souls that are just trying to learn League for the very first time. Instead, they can play on their main account again and not have to grind out an insane amount of games to reach their goal. Now here's the second idea, and I know it may be a little bit of a stretch, but I honestly have faith it could potentially work out. The idea is to implement a new ranking system based on not just wins, but your personal performance as well. Now, I know this idea has been tossed around a lot, but I really think there's some potential here. Halo Infinite is a perfect example of this ranking system in action. It takes into account if you win, but also how well you do. Now, there's obviously a few issues with this, and the biggest one is that it would move attention away from winning and more to stat padding. Also, people who are notorious for having terrible KDAs but still winning would be significantly handicapped, like the boss, for example. He has an atrocious KDA but is objectively one of the best players in the game. Still, the algorithm doesn't have to be based on KDA alone. It could be based on objective damage or even more. Still, no matter what, the amount the personal performance affects how much LP you lose or gain should be minimized to a maximum of like 10%. That way 90% of the LP is still determined by if you win or lose, and your MMR. This is also keeping in mind that you would still only gain LP if you won, so there's still incentive to win. What this would also do is incentivize players to not AFK or troll even if they're losing, because suddenly if you start running it down, there's now personal consequences involved. Someone who went 0 and 15 may lose an extra 5 LP than someone who went 5 and 5. It's not a perfect idea, but hey, it's just a thought. Number 9, events. It's kind of unfortunate that Riot doesn't do any crazy events anymore like they used to, like the Bilgewater event for instance, or even just seasonal maps. Their excuse is always that they don't have enough time, but at the same time, there are also community members doing it by themselves, so it's a little hard to buy that. Anyways, moving on, number 10, updates and patches. Some of the patches and updates Riot does are questionable at best. Clearly, not all of the updates they do are good. Chemtank is a great example of that. I am sure adding in the Chemtank Dragon took an insane amount of time, especially because it affected every single champion in the game. And that's a lot of time that could have been put elsewhere, like maybe into some league events or seasonal maps, for instance. I know Rito likes to do surprises, but instead, I think it would be a good idea to add in a voting system, just like they do for VGUs. Riot could just have a bunch of ideas ready to go, which I'm sure they do already, and the community could just vote on what they wanted implemented into the game. That way, instead of spending hours, days, or even weeks on projects, they could just say, maybe Chemtank isn't a good idea since everyone downloaded it. There's almost no downsides to implementing something like this, and the positives would be more and better updates. It's hard to argue with that. I mean, a system like this is quite literally what saved some other games like RuneScape, for example. The company who runs RuneScape, Jagex, started implementing a bunch of updates which ultimately killed the game. But then they added in this poll booth with update ideas, and the community would just vote on what they wanted or what they didn't want. And in order for it to actually be added into the game, they would need like 85% of the vote to say yes. Super simple, but very effective. Always learn from other people's mistakes. Number 11, voice chat. Okay, so I know there's a lot of controversy with this one, but in the end, it honestly makes a lot of sense to add it in. Let me explain. First off, League is a game all about communication, so it just makes sense in the first place. But more importantly, it would 100% drop the rate of toxicity in League and make it a more team-based game at the same time. People are far less likely to flame in chat than they are on a keyboard, mainly because people are wusses. I mean, this concept of voice chat is basically in every FPS game already, including Valorant, so why wouldn't you add it into a MOBA like League? I know people are afraid because League is so toxic and they're worried that it would translate over in voice chat, but I promise that people who chat in game won't say the same things they do over voice chat, or at least most people. Plus, if you're introverted and still just don't want to talk to anyone, that's completely fine. You can always just mute everyone and then you're just back to the way League is now. In other words, there is no downside to it. Speaking of muting, one of the things they need to fix is that if you mute someone in game, it should also mute them in post-game chat. At least in my experience, I've ended up muting someone while playing only to get blasted by messages from them right after the game is over, which kind of defeats the purpose of muting them. Funny enough, it actually used to mute them in both places, but for some reason, Riot changed it back. Anyways, number 12, drunk queue. Okay, so this one isn't exactly a need, but more of a want. I saw someone post this on Reddit a while back, and I thought it was a pretty good idea. Now, obviously, they probably can't add it in as a permanent game mode, but maybe for April Fools or something. Just a game mode of complete chaos where no one cares what the hell is happening. Anyways, let me know what other changes you would like to see in the game. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye. A massive shout out to Josh, Stefan, Senzo, Noctak, and James for being tier 3 patrons, and thank you so much to my other patrons as well. Bye.